to be your authentic self. And in being your authentic self, you will shine. Being your authentic self, that authenticity is so powerful. It's the most powerful frequency on the planet. And I believe it because people glow differently. They shine differently when they're doing the thing that they were born to do. And you know what that feels like because it feels like you're in the flow. All of a sudden, you've got synchronicities. You're magnetizing people to you.
Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Anniston Riekstins, and this is the InPowered Life. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast. I'm your host, Rudi Riekstins, and today we have a very special guest that is joining us in the InPowered Life Podcast studio. We love to bring people into the InPowered Life that have done something or achieved something pretty remarkable out and in the world. And when they've done something that has the power or the potential to not only impact the person, but through them having had an experience, they can then turn around and teach what it is that they've done or learned to lessen somebody else's time in the pain. That is so true for almost anyone that has written a book, especially books that are self-help or whether they are autobiographies that are just sharing what was somebody else's experience. And today's guest has so beautifully been able to do that. And I get to lovingly welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast, not for the first time, my co-host, Anniston Blair Riekstins. Anniston, welcome to the InPowered Life.
Well, thank you. It feels a little bit surreal to be here in this capacity. Typically, Rudi and I are conversating together around a topic and just helping you guys re-perceive or reframe a certain idea. And today is quite an honor, and I feel like a long time coming.
If you are listening to this episode, I have just placed a hardcover copy of my wife's book in front of the camera. So head over to YouTube so you can see how beautiful the cover is of this book. I want to just start off by telling you how very proud I am of you. I recently heard that something like 90% of people want to write a book, but less than 3% of people ever write a book, and less than 1% of those people ever publish a book. Anniston, you are now a published author. Your book comes out January 7th. It is available for pre-sale. And I would love to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind The Universe is Hiring. The title of the book is Discover the Role You Were Born to Fill. What was the inspiration behind The Universe is Hiring? And tell us a little bit about the process of putting it together.
Wow. Well, so this book is not one that I feel like I necessarily chose. And let me explain that. So many years ago, I want to say it was sometime during the COVID pause, I sat down to meditate one morning, and what had been going on around me was a lot of confusion, a lot of people very uncertain. Every time you turned on the TV, it was, this is never before happened. We don't know what to expect and what to anticipate. It felt like the whole world had been put with a blindfold on, you and I included. And we've shared this story many times on the podcast where we felt like we had blindfolds on. We didn't really know what was coming. We had both been furloughed. And so of course, naturally there were these fears, right? This fear of, oh my gosh, like what if the jobs dry up, and what if, we go into a massive recession and there's no money and all of this fear. And so I leaned in heavily to my meditation practice during that time, as did you. And that was really my reprieve, right? My way of resetting and feeling better and just creating space in my head amongst all the noise that was happening throughout the day. And I remember this one specific morning, I was able just to really drop into a nice meditation. It was still, I was quiet. And then all of a sudden, I saw this image in my mind's eye. And it looked like one of those newspaper ads that you would see, for those of you that are old enough to still who would look in the wanted ads in a newspaper. And I saw this image and it said, "The universe is hiring." And then below it had all of these requirements. And I actually started laughing in my meditation because I was like, well, that's funny. Because, I thought, well, that's kind of funny to think about. The universe is hiring, because again, my deep fear at the time was, what if no one hires me? Right. And it was like, the universe is hiring. And then all the requirements spoke into, it's going to work. But in order to step into this role, right, and to apply for this role, you've got to be willing to trust your intuition. You have to be your authentic self. You have to be willing to master the gifts that were given to you and share them with other people. You've got to trust in the flow and learn how to surrender. You've got to be able to take action. It was all of these very specific actions. And after the meditation, I immediately got out my laptop. And I thought, this will be such a fun social media post. And I actually created a Canva post recreating what I had seen in my mind's eye exactly. And I showed it to Rudi. I showed it to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, look, isn't this great? And you looked at it and you're like, that is not a social media post. That is a book. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, I think you're right. This is a book. So that was the beginning where I feel like this book chose me because I didn't come up with it. I'm very much acknowledging that this came from God. It came from all that is. The creator of life, in my opinion, dropped this seed of an idea in my head. And the journey really began from there. Because I would love to tell you that I immediately got into action and I wrote the book in a couple of months and I found a publisher and it was done within a year. No, I sat on it for a while because sometimes what happens, I think, is we get these ideas, these things come to us, but then we've got to do the work of actually, number one, feeling worthy of them. Number two, getting over any fears that we have of moving forward. For me, the big one was, fear of being seen. It was fear of being judged, the fear of my words not mattering amongst all the other brilliant authors out there. I mean, I had to face every bit of it in this process. And so when I say that this book was my teacher, this book was a teacher. And I've learned and I've grown so much in this process that what's incredible is I've been able to take my life's work and condense it into 200 pages, right? Because I've been a student of personal development and spirituality, and I've read thousands of books and I've coached and we've created courses and events. And this has always been my passion, right? Helping people get to their fullest potential. I always wanted to write a book. I just really never knew how it was going to come about. And I think that inspiration of coming from outside of me, it became my why because it didn't just become a want to. I felt like it was a responsibility.
So I wanted to hold back on what does the cover look like for anybody that's listening to the audio version of the podcast. And it is a beautiful white cover book. And then there is a newspaper clipping on the very front, and it says the universe is hiring, and it's been tacked to a wall, almost like you were in a Starbucks and somebody had torn an ad out and placed it. And what I love about this so much is that, Anniston, when she goes to a library, she doesn't go in on a specific mission looking for a specific book. She will walk the aisles and then wait for a book to jump out. Now, the books rarely fall off the shelf. It's happened, but they rarely literally fall off the shelf. She just walks through and then picks a book and reads the title and she follows this inspiration. And every book that she finds in the library or in an airport or wherever we see volumes of books, it's always what we need. It's like the book somehow finds us, and the universe is hiring screams from the cover that there is a message for you within this and that you are very uniquely qualified for something that only you can fulfill, and that the universe, the benevolence of all things, is waiting for you. So that sounds very ethereal, out there. I'd love to ground it for our audience for a second. What is The Universe is Hiring? What can we expect from your book?
So The Universe is Hiring is hopefully a wake-up call for people. I think that most people, the majority of people, unfortunately, are walking around and like they're sleepwalking, not conscious or thinking of, what am I here for? What am I here to do? What is this life about? What am I supposed to share with other people? What are my gifts? Like not really asking those questions, and instead just on a hamster wheel of, well, this is what it is, and recreating old patterns and living with these limitations and beliefs that their life doesn't matter, that they just need to be here to survive. And The Universe is Hiring is a roadmap to teach people how to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive in your life. And what does it mean to thrive? It means to be able to reach your fullest and highest potential for what this life stands to be for you. And not only for you, more importantly, what you stand to share and impact with other people. And it's meant to be a way or to give people a roadmap that they can follow, to not just remember and reconnect with who they are authentically, because that's where the gold is, right? Is really peeling back the layers and the taking off the masks and remembering who you are at your core, so you can reconnect with those gifts that you've been given, that you and only you have, so that then you can turn around and share it with other people. And in doing so, you experience the greatest fulfillment and bliss and love and reach your highest potential. And it's a formula for life, in my opinion. It's a formula for how to approach your way of being in this world. Because so often, especially in the West, we're fed a lot of lies. I feel like as we're growing up, you need to keep your head down. You need to do the work. You have to go to college in order to succeed. You need to make sure that you get a job that has the medical and the 401k. Forget about your hobbies unless they're tied to a paycheck. It's just a waste of time. Keep your head down until you retire, and then maybe you can enjoy your life a little bit, right? And I just think it's setting people up to fail instead of what would life have looked like if, when we were in grade school, we had a class that was teaching you how to identify your unique gifts and then teaching you how can you start to master those and share those in a meaningful way, because you matter and that gift matters and it's important, even if you don't know anyone else who has that. And so I know that was a very long answer to your question, but I'm very passionate about this because it has been my journey to the fulfillment I have now. I have never been happier, more successful, more fulfilled, more full of joy and love, because I finally put my focus on the right thing. Instead of just reaching for the things and the desires and the house and the accumulation and security, I put my focus on who am I and how can I impact other people? And how can I start to share my gifts and share my purpose with the world? And that has been the gateway to not only all the things which have come, but the difference is the things have come and I feel fulfilled. If you're only focused on the things, you'll get the things maybe, but you will not have the fulfillment that you seek.
You got the inspiration to write this book in a time in your life where you didn't have a tremendous amount of certainty. And you were in a place where you were questioning your worth. You were questioning where you were going to work, where your income was going to come from. And I'm only repeating what you've shared because you've just told us that the inspiration came in a time of uncertainty, and you're publishing the book as the happiest, most fulfilled version of you today. And I have been beautifully along the sidelines watching you go throughout this entire journey. And so not everybody has that vantage point. But what I love about your book, and for the benefit of the audience, I have read this book in pieces as chapters were being written. And then I had the privilege of reading the draft copy of the book. What's interesting is every time I get on a plane or I travel anywhere, I take the book with me, and not the hard copy version that has come out, because I will sit on a plane and I'll just open the book at random and I'll read something. And we have books in our bookshelf that also are, in my mind, just the most beautifully, I want to say, channeled books that have been poured into someone, through someone, for the benefit of moving people in humanity forward. That if you read any page, any chapter, any section, it somehow feels like it's applicable. And I feel like this book is applicable. And I've read so many times different portions of it. I'm in the book in so many different ways because you've brought stories into it. And yet when I read it, I'm still reading it as if it's new. What I love is that you have actionable steps that you close out each section with. And these were things that you brought into your everyday, into your life. You have many times on the podcast spoken about having a spiritual tool belt, that when you're experiencing something, here's a tool that I want to be able to put forward. And so this is not just reading a story. It's not just a memoir. It's not just being able to say, hey, I did this and now I'm doing this. It's saying, hey, who are you? Where are you? Are you feeling this? What do you want? What's the desire? And then you move people forward with very specific actions without spoiling any of the book, because obviously I would love for people to go out and support you and to support themselves through reading and or buying The Universe is Hiring. But what has or been your greatest gift that you got in writing it through one of the exercises that you promote inside the book?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. Well, as you said, like, first of all, I am a big believer through my own life experience that experience is always our greatest teacher. You know, I've read thousands of books. I love to read. I love to learn. And through that, you know, obviously I've learned, you know, there's a difference between books that can radically, absolutely shift your life and those that just become ideas that live somewhere that maybe one day you call back on and maybe you don't. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys have read books before where you, like, if I said, tell me about the book, you'd be like, I don't even remember. I know I read it, but I have no memory of it. And I can tell you why. If you don't have a memory of it, it's because you didn't do anything with it. You didn't actually anchor any of the information. In order to anchor the information, you need to take an idea. You need to be able to apply the idea in some meaningful way. And then through repetition, start to practice the idea. And then you start to embody the idea. Now it's no longer just an idea in your mental body. It's actually something that's a part of you. And then you turn around and teach it. That's the cycle. And you haven't fully learned a lesson until you can turn around and teach it. And so I was very intentional about the exercises that I included at the end of every single chapter, because my goal, and again, I say it's really, none of this was mine. And I feel every word in that book was inspired. I was connected when I was writing, and I trust that whatever was meant to go in those chapters did. But the applications and the exercises are very specific exercises that not only I have done myself with great reward and impact to anchor these ideas and to embody them, but also have taught to many other people, and they've had incredible impact. So every single exercise is tried and tested, and some are super simple and will be really fast. Most of them are pretty simple. And I think the simplest things are usually the most powerful. And some will take a little bit more time. But my goal was that if you picked up this book and you did what you do on a plane and you just opened to a chapter, even if it was halfway through the book, that you could read that chapter on its own, do the exercise or the application. I call it putting it into practice, which is at the end of the chapter. And your life would radically change just from doing that one simple exercise, taking the knowledge, applying it, that it would change and alter the course of your life and the trajectory of your life in a meaningful way. Obviously, I recommend reading the whole book because, you know, it is like layering a cake and one idea leads into the other. And it's a very holistic approach. But my goal is for you to feel like this book was a coaching companion, that it was going to guide you and lead you by the hand. In fact, there's a section there, it's called the roadmap. And This is, if followed, a formula that can be replicated again and again and again at every different level of your life to ensure that you are not just in this constant state of trying to find your purpose or trying to fulfill your purpose, but that you are in a state of being who you came here to be and reaching your highest potential.
I just picked up the book now to identify what was the chapter in, because I couldn't remember which chapter it was. And it's chapter 3 about discovering your purpose. I have the privilege of going into companies almost every single day in different capacities, whether it's in person or whether it's virtually. And one of the most commonly asked questions that I get, which I love that you address inside the book, is about how do I find my passion or how do I find my purpose? You mentioned it earlier when you were describing the inspiration for writing this book. The number one thing that people want is to feel passionate or to feel purposeful about what they do. And we spend more time at work than we are anywhere else. And that's why I love that this is written in a way that it's really a play on words, because the universe is hiring as if you're going for a job, but it's about living your highest and greatest potential, not applying for a job. Yet you reference, you've got to rewrite your resume, who are you going to be? How are you going to show up? Find your passion, your purpose. Could you speak into how can someone find their purpose, or how can they create passion?
Well, I'll start by correcting one word you used in that sentence. And that word you said was find. Because to find something indicates that it's outside of you. And instead, I would replace that word with align. To align to something means it's already there, right? You just need to realign with what is already there. And I use this example in the book of, have you ever been looking for your keys? And you're like, I don't know where my keys are. I can't find my keys. And you look everywhere. You could spend an hour doing that. And then all of a sudden you look down and you realize they're in your pocket and or your sunglasses, and they've been on your head the entire time. And you're like, how was I not even aware that they were there the whole time? It's impossible for you to disconnect from what is a part of you. Your purpose comes from within you. It is not outside of you. And so I think the reason why most people seek it outside of themselves is because they're resisting doing the inner work. And the inner work I'm talking about is the work of reconnecting with your authentic self, of who you really are. And so we start by unpacking and saying, okay, what are your passions? Like, what are you naturally interested in? What do people come to you for? And I have like a ton of questions in that chapter specifically just to help people to start thinking, start asking those questions so that they can start getting inspiration and more insight into, I always have loved to do this. What's interesting is most people have an easier time identifying somebody else's purpose than you actually have of identifying your own. I mean, it didn't take me but 2 minutes when I met you to know like what you're here to do and how you shine, because when you align with your unique gifts, right? Or your passions, like those were given to you. You think about it, like, why do you love doing specific things? Why do you love so much getting up on a stage and inspiring people? I mean, that passion has been there since well before you ever had an opportunity to do it, right? It was just an idea, but something about it lit something up in you. But then you have to do the work, right? Of believing you're worthy of it. And actually, the journey begins, because I actually think what we're meant to do, there's a lot of fears in between you and that thing. And you've got to push through it all so you can get to the other side and fulfill it. And in doing so, you fulfill your other purpose here, which is to learn, to grow, to evolve. And it's all connected. So your purpose is not a job title. Because if you were to leave your job, so let's say you thought, oh, my purpose is to be a doctor. Okay, well, what if you become a doctor and then 10 years later you decide I'm going to do something different? Are you purposeless? Is your purpose gone? Because now you've left being a doctor. And I think people get stuck there. They think, but this is what I wanted to do for so long. And now I'm here and now I'm unfulfilled and I'm lost. And I don't know what to do. You have to understand that your purpose is an ever evolving target. And your purpose is to share your gifts with the world, the gifts that were given to you by your creator in a meaningful way. Your purpose is to learn, to grow, and to evolve, and to be a student here because we're here to learn. And ultimately, it's to be your authentic self. And in being your authentic self, you will shine. Being your authentic self and just that authenticity is so powerful. Rudi will say it's the highest, it's the most powerful frequency on the planet. And I believe it because people glow differently. They shine differently when they're doing the thing that they were born to do. And you know what that feels like because you feel like you're in the flow. All of a sudden you've got synchronicities. You're magnetizing people to you. And it's really, in my opinion, like what makes the world feel magical when you are aligned with your purpose.
So what would your advice be for somebody that's listening to this episode right now and maybe they've identified as a doctor or a teacher or an accountant and they're wanting to really align with their highest potential to live a more passion-fulfilled life where they're not identifying with just one area? How do you move that ever-evolving target if you've spent your lifetime identifying as something?
Sure. So I think the key is you've got to start. And I know that sounds really simple, but I'm going to use this as an example. Okay. So I knew even before Rudi and I met, I really had landed on like my dream would be to travel around the world, to inspire people, to motivate people. I had a quiet, silent dream of writing books, although I would never have admitted that to anybody because I didn't believe I could at that point. But I knew what I wanted to do. And Rudi knew what he wanted to do. But it's one thing to know and have an idea, and then quite another to actually start being that. And so we try to, oftentimes I feel like what happens is people make the mistake of, and myself included, you spend a lifetime preparing to be something instead of just starting to be it. So you'll read all the books. Oh, I need to go back to school. Let me go back to school. Let me get the coaching certification. Let me do this. Let me buy that URL and get my website up and running, right? Before they actually start being what it is that they feel like they're here to do. So for me, my purpose is to be a powerful, inspiring, authentic leader who opens up hearts and minds with my words and reminds people of their worthiness and their unique purpose in this world. That is what I believe my purpose is. That purpose can be expressed in the grocery store. It can be expressed when I'm with my kids in the car. It can be expressed in a boardroom. It can be expressed on a stage. It can be expressed through a book. It can be expressed through a podcast. Your job oftentimes is just the vehicle that you're expressing your purpose in this moment. And it's a mistake to think that your job is a mistake because you're exactly where you need to be. And where I think the magic happens, if you really want to really disrupt and start shifting things in your life, you start being, number one, your authentic self. Wherever you work, you start bringing your passions there, even if it has nothing to do with your job. And you see what happens. Because what will happen is people will start to take notice. They'll want to be around you. I had this one woman who she loved to bake cakes. And she wanted to, she dreamt of, being on food TV and having her own bakery and all of these things. But here she is, she's just a woman who's like an administrative coordinator working a 9 to 5. So how do you bridge the gap, right? How do you take that dream from where you are right now to where you want to be? And I said, well, why don't you just start? I'm sure there's people in your office who would love to eat your cakes. I'm sure they would love that. So she's like, okay. So she started baking cakes, bringing cakes in to work and showing everyone what she did and then sharing it with other people. she then naturally met other people who worked with her who actually had the same passion. So then they started bringing in food. And so it became like this big thing. And then all of a sudden people were like, hey, I've got a Thanksgiving, holiday coming up in my house and all my family's coming in. Could you bake a cake for my family? I'll pay you. And then it became, hey, do you ship? Because I have a family member in the other, you see what I mean? Like that's how it happens. But if you're so stuck on, I've got to make it all perfect and I've got to get out of the 9 to 5 before I can start being and doing what I really want to do that really lights me up, you will be waiting a very long time.
So what's beautiful is that I never shared any questions with Anniston before hitting record. And I know a lot of people would think that that's crazy because we live in the same household, but I didn't want her to know what I was going to be asking. And so you had no idea that I was bringing in a closing question as it relates to what you just shared. And that is that, I have to roll back a little. Anniston called me from Charlotte a few years ago. She was going on a business trip to Florida and she had left Wilmington. It's a 44-minute flight. And so the plane went up, plane went down, and she wasn't even they hadn't even allowed them to take their seatbelts off, and she'd already called me. And when I answered the phone, she was speaking so fast, like she had taken speed on the plane. And she was like, oh my gosh, Rudi, I just had this download. I had the most incredible meditation. And I was like, I need you to slow down. I cannot understand what you're saying. And she's like, oh, I've got this idea and it's for a book. And this is going to be the title. And this is chapter 1. This is chapter 2. This is chapter 3. And this is what's in each chapter. And she literally rattled off 17 chapters by title with the book. And so she then ran off and wrote this book and then never published it. And it just sat in a folder on her desktop. And the reason I share this is to really set up the question. And I want the audience to really hear the value of this. Anniston got on a plane, closed her eyes, put on a meditation track, and in the middle of the meditation, something, somewhere aligned, and this book just dropped into her mind. And not just the title of a book like she got with The Universe is Hiring. She saw every single chapter by title, what was going to be involved. She already said, oh, this story is perfect for this chapter. This is going to happen here. And she had this entire inspiration flow through her, and her responsibility was to bring it out and into the world. But at the time, she was working a corporate job and didn't want everybody to think that she was trying to leave her corporate job or that her corporate job wouldn't be safe if people found out. She wanted to start a podcast, but couldn't because what if we were judged? There were so many things at that time that you had inspired action or inspired moments to take action, but you did not take a lot of action. You were phenomenal in your job, in your career, as a wife, as a mother, but anything that would internally light you up, we call, turned on, like spiritually turned on, like you just cannot wait to get it going, you would stifle. And something has clearly shifted in the process of writing this book. We now have a top podcast. We both have thriving careers. My company and you are a senior vice president of an organization, a massive company. You're thriving there, and you've been able to bring your passion and your purpose into your workplace. And I would love for you to speak into a little bit about what did it take to shift you from little Bo Peep who didn't want to do anything to this ferocious person who has these incredible inspirational thoughts flowing to you that you instantly put into action?
Great question. Thank you for asking it. And I think it really, I need to start by just saying that was my path for so long. It was the pattern, right? Like I became a seeker in my early 20s. And yet what I did from the get-go, because at the time, I was working in a company, it was very corporate, and I had a lot of friends who didn't necessarily, weren't very spiritual, and I had relationships and they weren't very spiritual or weren't really into it. So I from the get-go compartmentalized. So I would have this part of myself in the morning. I would have my quiet time and I would read and I would study, and I'd be having these inspiring moments and these breakthroughs. And then I would go to work and be my work self. And then I'd go out to work to meet my boyfriend and be with my in my relationship self and whatever he wanted me to be. And so I essentially put myself into little boxes, which was okay. It worked for me until such a time as I started feeling that pull, which I believe we all do, to step into the role that we were born to fill. And it's not going to leave you alone. And I started feeling this pull to step into being a teacher and a coach, because it was what I was doing naturally anyway. Like I was always the confidant. People would come to me and ask for advice all the time. I studied lots of different topics so that I could support my friends and family and give them even better advice. And so I started to recognize, especially after Rudi and I got married, that this was a thing. Like this was my dream, was to support and inspire, and to not just do that, specifically to help people transform. That's my jam, is that transformation piece. And I really wanted to do that. But what I kept trying to do is I kept trying to move forward while still compartmentalizing everything, which just can't work, because I was siphoning off my power. Does that make any sense? So I was like at 10% juice, because I would be at work and conversations would even come up, maybe even around the same topic of something I had been studying. And I would mute myself. I would be like, oof, I don't want to say this here. This wouldn't be appropriate. They wouldn't accept me here. So at home though, meanwhile, every morning I'm getting up and we're meditating, I'm writing, we're hosting these coaching sessions in our home. I mean, we were expanding there. But then I would go to work and I felt like they had to be separate. And I really, truly believed, and it was a limiting belief, but I believed that in order for me to fulfill my purpose and reach my highest potential, I would have to leave my corporate job, because I just didn't see a world where those two things could mesh. And it wasn't until you actually, Rudi, came into the company. So let me explain. We had started a company. He had started a company with his brother in Cincinnati. He had left the day-to-day of the business with his goal of becoming, a writer, a speaker, a coach, and then was headhunted to actually come and take a high-level position in the company I worked for. Different department, but same high-level position. And when he came in, he was coming in from a very different mindset than I had been, right? Because here's me, trying to keep all my worlds separate. And then Rudi comes in with all of his spirituality and all of his coaching. And he refused to not just be himself. Like he didn't care what other people thought. And in that season of life, he was my teacher. And it was hard. It was hard for me to watch, because I felt like I was just getting smacked in the face with reality, which is that I had been the one making the choice of not showing up. And what if all these years I had been at this company, I had been brave enough to just be myself and to share all the wisdom that I have? Like, how many lives would I have impacted? Would I had changed? And where would I have been, right? Instead, I was in this perpetual state of waiting for, when I leave this job, this is what I'll do. Like I even would prepare and build websites and not launch them yet, because I didn't want anyone to see them. I wouldn't post on social media because, we can't do that. Don't know what the president's going to think about that. What if I get fired, right? I had all of these stories. So it was that experience of watching you come in and do so bravely and impact other people's lives that was a real moment of realization for me. And I ultimately wound up leaving that company, as did you, but I was never the same after that. And I made the promise that if and when I were to take another job anywhere else, that I would show up as me, that never again would I be stuck in a state of waiting or thinking that it wasn't safe to be myself, because that's all an illusion. If they don't like me or they don't approve of me, it's not my place. Then there's bound to be another company that will, or another business or opportunity. So when the opportunity came for me to work for the company that I now work for, I got onto that interview with the president of the organization. And even though in my head, I was thinking, no, I don't really want to take another job. Like Rudi and I have a good thing going with our coaching business, and I really want to support that. I got on and I said, you know what? This opportunity came to me. I'm going to see what this is about, but I am going to be 100% me. So I told him all the things I love. I said, I love to coach. I love to host live trainings. I love transformation. I like to write. I have a podcast. I just said, listen, I get this is not what you're hiring me for, but you need to know who I am and what really lights me up. And what the most surprising thing was when he turned around and he said, well, great. That sounds amazing. He's like, I would love for you to bring all of those passions and let us benefit from them. Like, bring all of those gifts with you. Yes, I want you to do a job, but I want you to be you. And so that this experience has been night and day different. And not only, do I get to show up every day as a powerful, inspiring, authentic leader who opens hearts with her words and minds, I get to do it in every call, in every boardroom, with every initiative, with every project. But I also get to do a lot of training, and I've been able to impact thousands of people's lives, and it has grown and it has qualified me. And I think that's the other thing is this, you're constantly being qualified. So wherever you are, you're meant to learn something. And I'm just constantly in a state of being qualified for whatever's coming next. And I can't tell you what that is. I know in my head what I want and what we talk about, but I just feel like that it's being willing to show up where you are and being willing as who you are, share your gifts, and your external reality will start to evolve and change around you. Opportunities will come for you to do it more. And people will start to take notice. They will start to come to you for what it is that you do so well. And you will no longer ever question, because you will instead just be in your knowingness of who you are, your worth, and what you're here to do in the world.
I am so effing proud of you. I'm just proud of you for who you are, for how you show up, for all of what you've done, for writing this incredible book that is no doubt going to change so many people's lives. But more than anything, it has impacted and changed our lives. So thank you for showing up. To the audience, I highly recommend you go into the show notes and grab the Amazon link. The book is available in all platforms where you can buy books, but we're going to ask you to go to Amazon so that you can rate, review the book itself, as that is going to help her in the algorithm of putting her book out in front of more and more people. And so the universe is hiring. Discover the role that you were born to fill. Anniston Blair Riekstins, thank you so much for joining us on the Empowered Life Podcast. I freaking love you.
I love you too. And thank you to everyone listening. We'll catch you on the next show.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.